After 30 years of loyal service, Frank Delaney was fired just 4 days before earning his full pension. But when the company tried to quietly erase him, they didn't expect him to fight back, with strategy, not sympathy. What starts as a corporate betrayal turns into a nationwide scandal. This isn't just revenge, it's justice served cold. I always figured I'd walk out of Crestwood Technologies with my head held high, maybe not with balloons and a sheet cake in the break room, but with a handshake, a smile, and the full pension I'd earned over 29 years and 11 months of blood, sweat, and duct tape. Instead, I got Brandon Chase. "We're restructuring," he said, not even looking at me. "Hope there's no hard feelings. You understand how business works." I stood in the middle of the conference room, the same one where I'd helped install the new HVAC system last summer, trying to understand how a kid with gelled hair and a business degree could erase nearly 3 decades of my life in a sentence. His laptop glowed in front of him like a shield. He tapped something into it while fluorescent lights above buzzed. "Too bright. Too cold." "Budget cuts," he said, glancing up finally. "We're moving in a leaner direction. Nothing personal, Frank. Just business." I gave a small nod. What else was I supposed to do? Argue? Beg? I'd seen other guys my age get escorted out by security for making a scene. That wasn't going to be me. I still had my dignity, or at least I thought I did. A manila folder sat between us on the table, thick with final paycheck details, COBRA insurance information, and an itemized checklist of everything Crestwood expected back. It felt more like a severance obituary. I signed everything with the same black pen I'd been using for 5 years, the one with the faded Crestwood logo and a cracked cap. When Brandon reached across the table and said, "Badge and keys," I froze for half a second. My badge had lived on my belt so long, the clip had worn a groove in the leather. I unclipped it slowly. The plastic was scratched. My photo a time capsule from when my hair was still brown. Then came the keys. Master keys to every door in the 4-building complex. Supply closets, server rooms, maintenance sheds. They felt heavier now, like tiny anchors in my hand. I dropped them into Brandon's palm and walked out. No one said a word as I passed the cubicles. Some looked up, saw me, then quickly looked back down. I walked past the break room where I'd eaten lunch at the same table for 29 years. Past the security desk where I'd greeted the guards every morning at 5:30 a.m., like clockwork. The parking lot was quiet. My truck started on the first try. I sat there, hands on the wheel, staring back at the building. Something didn't feel right. I started at Crestwood in 1995, fresh off a brutal divorce that left me with half a savings account and a couch to sleep on. Facilities management wasn't glamorous. Fixing leaks, replacing filters, crawling into ceiling spaces to rewire thermostats. But it was solid. They told me if I stayed, if I gave them my years, they'd take care of me when I got old. I stayed. Through expansion projects, new buildings, server upgrades, employee onboarding, city inspections, I stayed. I trained every new facilities hire after me. Most of them moved on to better gigs. I stayed. 8 years ago, when my wife died of cancer, Crestwood's health insurance covered almost everything. The old CEO, Roger Marks, told me to take all the time I needed. Half the office showed up to the funeral. They were good people then, but Brandon Chase wasn't Roger Marks. Brandon took over 3 years ago. Fresh out of a fancy MBA program, barely in his 30s. He talked like a spreadsheet and smiled like a resume photo. Started bringing in consultants, talking about right-sizing the workforce. The little signs had been there. He stopped saying hello. My budget proposals came back with odd questions. Do we need quarterly safety inspections? Isn't it time to reduce maintenance contracts? Aren't you a little old for this kind of work, Frank? I figured he was just playing the part of a new boss, trying to prove himself before settling into the rhythm. But then came the meetings I wasn't invited to. Conversations that stopped when I walked in. A new guy in facilities who seemed way too interested in my job duties. Still, I stayed quiet. I had 4 days left before my full pension kicked in. 4 days. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, my termination paperwork spread across the surface like pieces of a puzzle, and something didn't sit right. According to the documents, I had 29 years and 10 months of service. That wasn't right. I pulled out the old pay stubs. The employee handbook is from when they updated the retirement policy 15 years ago. I did the math again. 29 years and 11 months. My final day should have been this Friday. Then I'd hit the 30-year mark, full pension. No questions asked. And then I remembered Brandon's company-wide memo from last month. I'd saved a copy. Effective immediately, it read. All retirement benefit calculations will be based on continuous years of service as defined in the current employee handbook. Employees approaching retirement eligibility should review their service records to ensure accuracy. I reviewed mine. Everything matched. Every year, every holiday, every overtime hour. They'd miscalculated, or hoped I wouldn't notice. I thought about calling Brandon, demanding a correction. But I already knew what he'd say. And then I remembered. Janice O'Connell, 12 years in HR before she retired last year. Smart, by the book, didn't let the company cut corners on employee rights. I'd heard she was doing consulting now. I still had her number. I stared at the digits for a long time. Calling her meant admitting I'd been screwed over. It meant not going quietly, but sitting there in the dim kitchen light with 29 years of service folded neatly into manila paper. Something inside me clicked. I wasn't angry. I was ready. I dialed the number. Janice answered on the second ring. Frank Delaney, she said before I could even introduce myself. I heard about what happened. Her voice was the same, steady, sharp, no nonsense. I think it's time we talk, I said. By Thursday morning, the quiet life I thought I was heading toward had transformed into something else, something sharper, heavier. I spent the early hours organizing more records Janice had asked for, old training logs, incident reports, even some congratulatory emails from upper management over the years. It was strange how much of my life had been documented in file folders and 3-ring binders. Every late-night emergency I fixed, every storm-damaged pipe I replaced, every time someone said, "We couldn't have done this without you," all of it was there. Proof that I mattered. That I'd earned those 4 days they tried to take from me. Around 10 a.m., Janice called again. "I need you to sit down for this," she said. I'm sitting. The Department of Labor didn't waste any time. They subpoenaed Crestwood's internal communication system, emails, meeting logs, server backups, everything. And, I asked, already bracing myself. They found emails between Brandon and someone in legal. A thread titled, "Pension Exposure Risk." Her tone flattened. "Frank, they knew exactly when your pension vested. They were watching the calendar, talking about trimming liabilities before year-end." It felt like being sucker-punched twice. First the termination, now the confirmation. I wasn't collateral damage. I was a target. Did they name me specifically? Yes, the email said. Delaney's full pension vests November 12. If we move. Before then, we mitigate a 6-figure liability. 6 figures. That's what 30 years of loyalty was worth to them, a bullet point on a risk analysis report. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting it sink in. Then I asked, "What now?" "Now," Janice said, "we prepare for war." That afternoon, I heard from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Maggie Reyes. She used to be in accounting before she moved to Florida. She'd seen my name mentioned in an industry forum. Somehow the word was spreading. "I heard you're going after Crestwood," she said. "You're not the only one who got burned." I told her what I could, careful not to say too much over the phone, but she offered something invaluable, her old emails. She had archived copies of budgets, HR memos, and internal audits, including one showing Brandon had slashed the facility's maintenance budget by 40% right after he took over. That cut pushed us to skip safety inspections and defer upgrades. Things I'd warned him could cost the company 10 times more down the line. Maggie's documents painted a damning picture, cost-cutting at the expense of employee safety and legal obligations. Janice was thrilled. That kind of recklessness doesn't just hurt pensioners, she said. It puts everyone in danger. The doll is expanding the investigation. By Friday, Brandon had gone silent. No more calls, no emails. Maybe he finally realized this wasn't going away, but someone else reached out. My phone buzzed around noon. Unknown number, I answered. This is Alan Perkins, the voice said. I'm with Crestwood's board of directors. He sounded calm, too calm like a man rehearsing empathy. Mr. Delaney, first let me say how sorry I am for the way things unfolded. We're conducting an internal review. With outside counsel? I asked flatly. A pause. Yes. I let the silence hang. Let him feel it. We'd like to make this right, he continued. Off the record, if you're willing to sign an NDA and withdraw the complaint, there's a generous severance package we can offer. There it was. The bribe. Wrap it all up in a tidy little payoff and make the problem go away. I'm not interested in hush money, I said. You want to make it right? Restore my full pension. Admit what you did. Apologize publicly. That's a complicated request, he said slowly. Then we're done. I hung up. That weekend I couldn't sleep. Not because I was anxious, but because I was awake in a new way. Alive. For years I had been just surviving, doing my job, going home, and trying not to think too hard about how quickly life moves on. But now, something had changed. I wasn't trying to retire anymore. I was trying to win. And that's when Janice called again, her voice electric with urgency. They're panicking, Frank. One of their lawyers just tried to negotiate with the Department of Labor directly behind our backs. Did it work? No. And you're going to love this, they're now investigating the entire HR department. Brandon's not the only one in the crosshairs. I felt something in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Satisfaction, not revenge. Not yet. But something close. By Monday morning, Crestwood Energy was on fire, and not the kind I used to fix in boiler rooms. News had leaked. An investigative journalist from the Tribune published a piece titled, "Retired Just in Time: How Companies Are Cutting Veterans to Save on Pensions." And there it was. My name, my face, my story. At first, I panicked. I wasn't used to being on this side of a headline. But when I read it, saw the truth in print, I felt something stronger than fear. Validation. Janice called shortly after. I didn't leak it, she said, but someone in the Department of Labor probably did. Either way, it's working. The board's in meltdown. 2 directors have already resigned. That afternoon, the Wall Street Journal picked it up. Then a segment ran on a local TV station. Every article was damning. Phrases like systematic pension manipulation, targeted layoffs, and ethical violations kept showing up, alongside Brandon's name. By Tuesday, the Department of Labor formally launched a broader investigation into Crestwood's employment practices. That same day, Brandon was placed on administrative leave. Officially, they said he was cooperating with the review. Unofficially, he was toast. I stood on my front porch that evening, watching the sun sink low behind the hills. It was quiet, peaceful. The way I'd always imagined retirement but never earned. Then the phone rang again. It was Alan Perkins from the board. Only this time his tone had changed. Mr. Delaney, he began, no more false empathy. On behalf of the board, I'm calling to offer a formal settlement. Not interested. Please, hear it out. I waited. We're reinstating your pension retroactive to your original vesting date. Full amount, no reductions. Health coverage included. You'll also receive a public apology signed by the board and issued to all employees. And Brandon? He hesitated. Brandon Moore has submitted his resignation, effective immediately. And HR? 3 department heads are on leave. We're conducting a full audit. There it was. Not just a win, a reckoning. Janice had warned me this might happen. Sometimes the threat of exposure is more powerful than any lawsuit, she'd said. You didn't just make noise, Frank. You exposed the rot. A week later, I walked back into Crestwood one last time. Not as a contractor, not as an employee, but as the man who stood up when no one else could. People stared. Some looked away in shame. Others nodded, quietly grateful. I didn't stop to chat. I had one last thing to do. In the lobby, there was a plaque commemorating Crestwood's 50th anniversary. My name wasn't on it. It never had been. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small piece of paper and taped it beside the plaque. On it, I'd written, "Loyalty doesn't end at 29 years, 11 months, and 26 days. Neither does justice. Frank Delaney." Then I turned and walked out. Finally, retired, this time with my dignity intact.